My name is Riley, now 27, narrates her life with poignant clarity, contrasting her journey with that of her younger sister, Ruby. Born and raised in a quaint rural town, Riley's family life was defined by uneven parental treatment that favored Ruby. Despite this, Riley grew up surrounded by her grandparents, parents, and sister in a house that often echoed with unfair comparisons. Ruby, 7 years Riley's junior, was the family's darling, her every wish prioritized, her every achievement celebrated. She attended a prestigious university and excelled in sports, while Riley, with only a high school diploma, ventured into the world of web design. Riley's parents showered Ruby with attention and expensive gifts, especially on her birthdays. Riley's birthday, however, often went under-celebrated, merged with Christmas festivities, and her gifts were uninspiring study materials. Riley recalls how her parents' unequal treatment extended to their extracurricular activities. While they never missed any of Ruby's soccer practices or games, they overlooked Riley's tennis matches, including her final one in middle school. This neglect painted a stark picture of disparity between the sisters, though Ruby often tried to bridge the gap with her encouragement and small acts of kindness, like the bouquet of flowers she gave Riley after her last tennis match. Their grandparents occasionally stepped in, attempting to temper the parents' blatant favoritism with pleas for more balanced affection, but their passing left Riley without their supportive presence. Over time, even Ruby, who had always been supportive, reduced her defenses of Riley under the weight of their mother's growing disapproval. As the financial strains of life without their grandparents' support came to light, Riley was forced to abandon her dreams of studying design in college. Instead, she took an office job at a small design firm, far from home but aligned with her passion for design, creating websites for women-centric services like hair and nail salons. Throughout her story, Riley reflects on the complexities of familial relationships, the pain of feeling second best, and the quiet strength it takes to pursue one's dreams in the face of adversity. Her journey is a testament to resilience, marked by a resolve to find fulfillment and success on her own terms despite the challenges of her upbringing. From the very start, I was eager to take on more responsibilities, and this drive led me to become an user experience designer in our office. While working closely with professionals was challenging, it fueled my passion to succeed as an interactive designer. Each day, my commitment deepened, making every moment of study crucial. Home became a place I visited less frequently, mainly because it felt like a burden due to my parents' disapproval of my career choice. Instead, I dedicated my free time and holidays to learning through online courses, steadily honing my software skills. This hard work paid off when I officially joined the design team. My enthusiasm did not go unnoticed, and soon I was being recommended helpful resources and making valuable contacts within the industry. For years into my career, I was managing my own projects as a full-fledged interactive designer. 8 years after high school, I was well established in my field when I heard that my sister, Ruby, was preparing to enter university to study medicine at a prestigious school in a major city. Known for her diligence and excellent grades, her acceptance seemed inevitable. Remembering our shared past and her support for me, I was compelled to help her with her university preparations. A few months later, she got into her first-choice medical school, and I congratulated her warmly. However, she expressed concerns about the suggested donation at her private medical school, which was not mandatory but implied. Our parents were worried about appearing underprivileged if they didn't contribute. Yet, with the high costs of living and tuition, Ruby planned to work part-time to manage her expenses, even though the demanding nature of medical studies would make this challenging. While I was willing to help, our family finances were tight. My father, a real estate agent, and my mother, who worked part-time, were already stretched thin. Surprisingly, they suggested Ruby ask me for financial support instead of approaching me directly, a move I found disheartening. Despite this, I chose to support my sister, covering the donation and other fees, allowing her to start her medical school journey, living independently near her university. Although she was busy with her studies and our interactions became less frequent and somewhat terse, Ruby occasionally reached out with simple requests, like wanting specific items or needing assistance, and I was always ready to help. Supporting her in these small ways, I hoped to make her challenging journey a bit easier. Ruby and I have always had a complex relationship, shaped largely by our parents' contrasting expectations of us. Although we sometimes shared meals, Ruby remained distant, often absorbed in her smartphone rather than engaging in conversation. Despite my efforts to connect, Ruby consistently reminded me how challenging her studies were, leaving me feeling perplexed and somewhat alienated. As her demeanor grew colder, our interactions felt increasingly forced. Attempting to lighten the mood, I mentioned our parents in a cheerful tone, suggesting they favored her achievements over mine. Ruby's response was sharp and dismissive. She argued that her path as a medical student was incomparably more significant than my career as a designer, which she claimed required no formal qualifications. Her words stung. She insinuated that anyone could learn design online, diminishing the effort I put into my craft daily. Her critical tone escalated as she echoed our parents' harsh comparisons. They praised her potential as a future doctor while dismissing my choices, not even recognizing the dedication involved in my work. This long-standing disparity in their support had ingrained a sense of superiority in Ruby, which she didn't hesitate to express. Feeling overwhelmed by her harsh words and our parents' evident favoritism, I found myself speechless and disheartened. Ruby, misinterpreting my silence for tears, gave a brief, condescending smile and left the table. Living on her own and surrounded by peers who never witnessed her earlier life, Ruby seemed to fully embrace the praise she received at university. She was constantly reminded of her prodigious nature, which only reinforced her dismissive attitude towards me. This dynamic persisted into the holidays when we both returned home. Despite her busy schedule, Ruby hadn't visited since starting university, and upon our return, our parents' focus was entirely on her, leaving me feeling more overlooked than ever. When we got back home, the dining table was overflowing with delights such as steak and pizza, a festive welcome for Ruby. That evening, a diverse crowd of neighbors, family, and Ruby's schoolmates from town assembled to celebrate. Ruby, visibly thrilled by the ambience, started to boast quite loudly. Mom always says I should visit more often, but my university is highly regarded, especially the medical program. It's incredibly challenging. With all our group projects, it's not like I can just take off whenever to chill at home. There's always something happening, and everyone reaches out to me, which can be quite overwhelming. I excused myself under the pretense of cooking, retreating to the kitchen. However, Ruby's loud voice carried through, narrating her academic exploits to anyone who would listen. This might have seemed acceptable to family, but to neighbors and peers, it likely came across as off-putting. Trying to shift the focus during a pause, an elderly neighbor directed the conversation towards me, asking about my career in design. However, Ruby and my parents jointly dismissed my efforts, making hurtful comparisons. She's trying her best, but frankly, she's not like her sister, they said, undermining my decision to forego college for a design career, a path distinctly different from Ruby's. Among the guests, several had not pursued higher education and were instead working or raising families. They, too, were enjoying the celebration and chose not to challenge my parents' harsh words, though their discomfort was palpable. Feeling increasingly alienated, I was about to leave quietly when Ruby called out, "You seem to come home quite often, Riley." "I'm thriving at university, so I'm not embarrassed." "Maybe you're this bold because you don't really care." Her words, followed by her laughter and our parents joining in, stung deeply. Angrily, I retorted, "Understood. Don't expect me next year." Dropping the tray I was carrying, I headed to fetch my coat and bag, leaving the room under the watchful, concerned eyes of our relatives and neighbors. As I declared that I wouldn't return, my resolve hardened. Exiting the house, I felt nothing but indifference towards Ruby and my parents, their dismissive waves echoing in my mind as I walked away. "Don't come back," they seemed to say cheerfully. On my way to the station, I fought to keep my anger in check. Returning home had always been emotionally taxing, especially as I pursued my dream of becoming an interactive designer. Initially, I used my career aspirations as a buffer from my family. Yet, as I advanced in my profession, distancing myself grew complicated and the familial ties, while strained, were not easily cut. Ruby, still shielded by her youth and university bubble, might not grasp the complexities of working life. Although our parents likely believed they were doing their best, the gulf between us had widened irreparably. Ruby remained the golden child in their eyes. Known for her academic prowess, Ruby was often held in high regard. Meanwhile, I found myself frequently dismissed and belittled during our family interactions. This atmosphere brewed a mix of anger and disappointment within me, leading me to question the integrity of any relationship where one's efforts are scorned, even if it involves family. Shocked by Ruby's appalling actions, I reached a pivotal decision to sever ties with my family. Several months later, Ruby reached out unexpectedly, bombarding me with messages and urging me to respond to her calls. Although I hadn't blocked her, I hesitantly took her call. She urgently inquired if I had managed to cover her tuition fees for the year. I reminded her calmly that I had previously paid the entrance fee and a donation upon her enrollment, but was unaware of the current year's tuition demands. Despite having depleted most of my savings to support her initial costs, I had no information on the subsequent fees. Over the phone, I could sense Ruby grappling for words, realizing the gravity of the situation. The end of that year brought more astonishments. After being explicitly told to stay away from home, they had the audacity to ask me to continue financing Ruby's education. Was it assumed that our parents could afford an out-of-state private university, or did they perhaps overextend themselves? Ruby mentioned that while our parents had managed her living expenses through other means, they struggled to cover her tuition, thus turning to me for help. The reason I could potentially afford Ruby's tuition stemmed from my progress as a designer at a leading company, where my salary had significantly increased. With minimal personal expenses, my savings had grown robustly. Aware of my career advancement, my parents likely expected me to financially support Ruby's education further. However, the funds they had set aside for her tuition seemed to have been frivolously spent. Despite the ease with which I could have continued assisting, I chose not to yield to Ruby's request. Days later, my parents also demanded tuition payments, but I stood firm in my refusal. Their urgent and reproachful demands only deepened my resolve. I felt increasingly alienated, perceiving no room for me within the family beyond my financial contributions. The persistent disregard for my feelings, coupled with the lack of sincere dialogue or apology, cemented my decision to step back from financially enabling their expectations. I almost considered forgiving her after hearing her message. She pleaded for help with her tuition fees, warning that without my assistance, she'd be expelled. Despite scholarships and part-time jobs, she claimed it wasn't enough. Her message was brimming with self-interest, even suggesting she could mediate with our parents on my behalf if I felt unwelcome at home. After saving those messages in a separate file, I deleted everything else from my phone, sent her a final message, and blocked her number. Family or not, I couldn't tolerate her condescending tone. I completely severed ties with my family, ushering in a fresh start. From a relative, I learned that Ruby managed to scrape together her second year's tuition through scholarships and loans from other relatives. Yet, with no further support for living expenses, she found herself overwhelmed by the workload of her studies combined with part-time work, eventually dropping out of university 2 months later. Previously, I had supported both her tuition and our family financially, but I ceased all support last year. Now, struggling without my financial aid, my parents were forced to take Ruby back home. Despite her academic potential, the lack of funds made further education impossible. Instead, she retreated into video games, her frustrations often erupting at night. By chance, I saw my parents once. They looked worn and defeated. Neighbors, feeling awkward, rarely spoke to them. My father, stressed, committed an indiscretion on his commute and was detained by fellow passengers. He avoided charges through a settlement, but had to resign from his job, adding to the family's financial strain. My mother tried to find work, but found it challenging with her limited experience. The relatives who once relayed messages from my parents grew tired of their demanding tone and eventually told me not to worry, that they'd handle things. I've since moved on, focusing on building a career in design. I've been selected for a major project that promises to elevate my professional reputation. Motivated by this opportunity, I'm also preparing to take university entrance exams and considering studying business management. As I face these new challenges, I'm filled with excitement for what the future holds. Meanwhile, back home, without any community support, my father and Ruby's situation seems increasingly dire.